Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Friday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head. My co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon, is out on assignment tonight. And as always, I am reporting to you from our Washington, D.C. studio. It's also the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News. We drink plenty of it around here. So you can go over to wiredtofishcoffee.com and get a great 10% discount on all of their great coffee by using the code JustNews at checkout. Now, it was a huge day at the Supreme Court today, and we're going to get into all of that with you in just a few minutes. In fact, a big portion of our show is going to be devoted to that. But before we drill down onto those, I want to focus on the mayoral race in New York. Now, America's biggest city is witnessing one of America's biggest political upsets in quite a while. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo being defeated in the Democratic primary by newcomer and self-described Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani. And Mamdani is generating all sorts of buzz, not just in New York, but around the country. Many progressive Democrats see him as the future of the party, and other centrist Democrats wish that he wasn't running at all, fearing that he will turn the majority of American voters even further away from the Democrat Party. Now, still others are saying that Mamdani's rise is a huge gift to MAGA and Trump Republicans, and frankly, I'm not sure which take is right yet. All I know is that the left thought President Trump becoming Republican nominee back in 2016 meant positive victory for Hillary Clinton and an era of Democrat rule for years and years to come. Now, of course, we all know that that didn't turn out exactly as expected for them. But I do know that Mamdani's ideas have been tried many, many times and never result in anything good. However, the split his candidacy is causing within the party is very interesting to witness. So take, for example, his latest interview on CNN last night. He was asked about capitalism and how he feels about it. And his answer actually sent a lot of Democrats into a tailspin. Check it out.
So when people say democratic socialist, right, and I'm curious what you think this means. I mean, do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on is dignity and taking on income inequality. And for too long, politicians have pretended that we're spectators to that crisis of affordability. We're actually actors, and we have the choice to exacerbate it, like Mayor Adams has done, or to respond to it and resolve it, like I'm planning to do.
Yeah, well, except for saying no when asked if he liked capitalism, the rest of that answer sounds exactly like an Obama-era Democrat. Those types of politics. That's why it is so surprising to see some on the left completely running away from it. Now, here's Mayor Eric Adams doing just that. He's not a Democrat anymore, supposedly. He's still on the left, obviously, and he's running against socialist policies all of a sudden.
This is a city not of socialism. No. I've been to socialist countries. This is a city where you could come as a dishwasher and you could own a chain of restaurants. This is a city where you can be a cab driver and then become a doctor. This is a city where you could go from homelessness to building housing. This is a city where you could be a young person who's dyslexic, a young person who was rejected, and eventually could be elected to be the mayor of the city of New York. This is the type of city we're in. This is not a city where you use idealism to state you're giving everything to everyone for free. There's no dignity in someone giving you everything for free. There's dignity in giving you a job so you can provide for your family and the opportunities that you deserve.
When was the last time you heard someone on the left talking like that? I can't remember the last time. Probably President Clinton back in the 90s, which was 30 years ago. So to make a long story short, I don't know how this mayoral race is going to end up. If Mamdani is elected, it's going to be terrible for New York City. But how will the rest of the country respond to it? Will it end up embracing Obama-era platitudes about socialism just pushed a lot further? Or will the country recoil from the Democrat Party like some more centrist Democrats think that they will? So there's a chance that this could all work out in the right's favor, but just like in the case of President Trump, I would caution against underestimation. All right, time now to turn to the big Supreme Court rulings, because if there's one thing that we can definitively say, it's that it was a good day at the court for President Trump. He spoke earlier about the court's decision to limit nationwide injunctions. Here it is.
I think taking power away from these absolutely crazy radical left judges is a tremendous, this is such a big day. This is a very big moment, and it gives gives power back to people that should have it, including Congress, including the presidency. And it only takes bad power away from judges.
All right, and our first guest, I am positive, is going to have a lot to say about this ruling. So I want to bring in the professor. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, I want to get your take on this one. There were obviously a lot of decisions, but the nationwide injunction one is the one that seemed to send earthquakes. What are your thoughts?
Yes, and that's the right way to refer to it, as the nationwide injunction case. A lot of people refer to it as the birthright citizenship case, but the court didn't actually rule on birthright citizenship. So this came up in a very unusual posture, and I think it was extremely strategic for the Trump administration to take this up in the posture they could challenge what has dogged them in the first administration and now the second Trump term, which is individual judges stymieing the agenda nationally, where Trump needs to win every single case. His opponents only need to win one because they get a nationwide injunction. So this was extremely strategic. It has a lot of potential to advance Trump's agenda moving forward.
Yeah. Professor Jacobson, I think that maybe the last time we had you on, or maybe the time before that, we were talking to you about all of these singular judges across the country who were ruling in ways, whether it was TROs or stays or injunctions or whatever the case may be. And we were talking about how it seemed like this was trying to replace the executive and there were remedies for Congress. When it comes to congressional remedies and Congress trying to kind of, I guess, reorganize the inferior courts, is that still necessary at this point, or do you think that this was the biggest part of the problem?
Well, I think the notion of reorganizing the courts sounds great. Whether they're actually able to get such legislation passed is a different story. So I think maybe long term, that's something worth working towards. But in the short term, this is a very important ruling because it says that Donald Trump essentially doesn't need to win 650 times. He only needs to win once, and the individual judges can't, stymie the administration. And so it's really important. That doesn't mean judges won't figure out ways around it. It's not the end of the story, but it's a very important ruling, which is immediate as opposed to some sort of legislation which may or may not happen in the future.
Yeah. And I want to read you a comment from Justice Amy Coney Barrett in that ruling. She said, "We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent, not to mention the Constitution itself. We observe only this: Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary." Seems like, as they call it, a bench slap.
Yes, I've heard other terms applied to it, but a bench slap would be a good one. Yeah. It was definitely a put down, and there were many others in the majority decision, essentially treating Justice Jackson as someone who is politically motivated, not really worried about the law, devoid of any philosophical foundations to what she was saying. And I think the important thing there is, remember, this was a 6-3 decision. 5 other justices signed on to an opinion severely bench slapping Justice Jackson. They could have just written concurring opinions. Some did, but they all joined in that. So the conservative majority seems to have a very low opinion of Justice Jackson.
Mm-hmm. And there was also a 2-word phrase that Justice Barrett used. I think it was boring legalese. And she used that with respect to Ketanji Brown Jackson. It seems to me, just from that 2-word phrase, that Ketanji Brown Jackson is isolating herself and possibly losing the respect of her peers.
It seems like she's already accomplished that loss of respect. She's not losing it, she's lost it. When 6 justices sign on to an opinion, which didn't use the word stupid, but basically called her stupid. I mean, if you read through what Justice Barrett wrote, is saying you don't know what you're talking about. You're divorced from legal precedent. You're divorced from the Constitution. And why are you complaining about legalese when your whole job is to focus on legalese? Your whole job is to focus on statutory language. So it really was about as close as you could come to 6 of the justices engaging in name calling. And I think it's, the people who support Ketanji Brown Jackson are going to still support her, who think she's the best thing. But I think she's viewed as the weakest link on the Supreme Court intellectually. Justice Sotomayor wrote an even lengthier dissent, in some ways an even more vigorous dissent. And while the majority disagreed with that, you didn't see the sort of commentary that they directed towards Justice Jackson. There's something about her approach to things that seems to bother the other justices. And I will note that no justice joined in her dissent. Justice Jackson wrote a dissent, and neither Kagan nor Sotomayor joined it, which I think tells you something.
Absolutely, it does. Okay, I want to move on to something happening in your city. Zohran Mamdani, elected as the Democrat nominee for New York City mayor. I have no words, but I'm sure you do.
Yeah, well, this is what you get from a higher ed system that produces people who hate our country, who hate our system, who are very manipulative, who try to couch everything in social justice terms. And he's what you get. I mean, he was the founder at Bowdoin College. So Bowdoin's an elite small school in Maine, liberal arts college. He was the founder of their Students for Justice in Palestine group at that campus, a really hideous anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Israel group. That's who this guy is. He's got many commentary regarding 9/11. He's got a lot of commentary regarding the October 7 massacre, which is so far out of the mainstream of the United States that to call him radical is charitable. So he comes from an anti-American, anti-Israeli, anti-capitalist background. And this is who the Democrats nominate to be the mayor of the largest city in the country. This should be a wake-up call for people. And this guy's very smooth and he's very manipulative. Don't take him lightly.
Yeah, and I dug into the numbers on the map, and it looks like, Wall Street voted against this guy, but there was a West Side sliver of people who voted for him, and I think that was probably young liberals. That's all I can imagine. I wanted to ask you something else about that, though, because there was a clip that resurfaced of him saying that he would arrest Bibi Netanyahu should he come to New York. Is that even legal?
No, I mean, mayor has no ability to arrest a foreign dignitary, a foreign, somebody here at the invitation of the U.S. government. So it can't happen, but it's sending a message. This is a radical guy. There was a clip that was circulated of him trying to, screaming at Tom Homan from, immigration enforcement. And he lost his cool. And this was a month ago. This is a guy who can keep the superficial social justice. I just want to help people. But he let his mask slip when he was screaming and had to be restrained when he was trying to get at Tom Homan. That's who this guy is. This is a very dangerous guy because most of the time he can keep it under control. But when he can't keep it under control, we saw the true face of him.
Yeah, I mean, he was hysterical in that video clip. It was unbelievable to see, but now he's the nominee. Professor William Jacobson, Cornell University law professor and founder of the Legal Insurrection Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us again tonight, Professor.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Next, we're going to have much more on these Supreme Court decisions today, including a big loss for Planned Parenthood after this quick break.
Hey, folks, if you're a homeowner like me, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is their target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. And that's when the problems begin because they start taking out loans using your equity and even sell your property. And you're not even going to find out it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice months later. That's a nightmare, right? So when's the last time you checked on your home title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is never, right? You need to do something about that right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes that might happen, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's a good deal. Find out why I trust Home Title Lock. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. As we talked about earlier, in a landmark 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court sided with President Trump today, curbing the power of lower courts to issue sweeping nationwide injunctions, the kind that repeatedly blocked President Trump's executive orders so far in his presidency. But there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to the Supreme Court today. There was a big win for states' rights and pro-life advocates with the ruling that upheld South Carolina's decision to cut off Planned Parenthood's Medicaid funding. So joining me now to talk about all of that and everything else that the Supreme Court did today, Chief Political Correspondent right here at Just the News, Ben Whedon. Good to have you. And attorney and Washington Times legal affairs reporter and author of the new book, Lawless Lawfare, Alex Sawyer. Alex, Ben, great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
The audience knows that we're going to be looking in the camera, but Ben's actually in the room with me, so it's nice. All right, so Alex, I want to start with you. The biggest decision, obviously, this nationwide injunction case. I think we talked to you about this last week or a week before that when we had you on. Big rumblings in the legal world. What do you think?
Yeah, so Justice Barrett basically said that there was really no history tied to the law in giving lower court judges the authority to issue these nationwide injunctions, that these really should be issued to the parties that are before a judge, not, parties who aren't even part of the lawsuit. She did point to class action, something called Rule 23, and, she was a prior law professor, so this is up her wheelhouse. But that's a way that a group of challengers could get before a judge and bring a lawsuit against a national policy, and it would be that single lawsuit. There is more hurdles for challengers to make. They have to prove similarities between class members. Sometimes there's even subclasses, but it would yield a better result because there would be more full hearings. It would allow the judge to have more authority when issuing some sort of, national blockade. And there would only be that one. It wouldn't be the system that we have now where you see people going to favorable forums, which I detail in Lawless Lawfare, when you have advocates that try to judge shop and look for a favorable ruling here, one there, and a way to get to the Supreme Court. So she kind of suggested maybe class actions is the way to go. But for now, she sent this case back to the lower court and told them to basically limit the injunction that they've so imposed.
Yeah. And Ben, I want to ask you, because you have covered for so long and so well the White House and also Congress. And obviously the legislative branch and the judicial branch are separate, but they do have an effect on each other because we've talked about this many times, the weaponized judicial system against President Trump, and that is rooted in politics. Do you think that this decision is going to have an effect on Capitol Hill politics?
So it certainly will. We have already seen from the President and Attorney General Pam Bondi that they're going to be using this as a springboard to ask the lower courts to allow them to proceed on several other policies that have already been enjoined. There was a provision that was in the big, beautiful bill that's faced some opposition in the Senate Judiciary that was going to limit the scope of what lower court judges can do, which, remember, lower courts are established by Congress, and that was really at the root of the ruling today, which is them saying that it's not really clear that Congress ever really intended for lower courts to have this broad sweeping injunction authority. That's in there. And so what you're going to see now is a more reserved judiciary that can't actually legislate quite to the same degree. We will see how that plays out at the Supreme Court level, but lower court judges are going to be somewhat taken out of the immediate legislative fights, and it's going to fall to Congress to actually follow through on their own legislation if they want to set policy in a timely manner at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Alex, I want to ask you about, and I just asked this about to my last guest, this two-word phrase that was used by Justice Barrett with referring to Ketanji Brown Jackson, saying, discussing boring legalese. And there was a much longer phrase that related to Ketanji Brown Jackson, and of course it was a bench slap. But as an attorney, can you imagine how would that feel? If you were listed in a decision like this and you were referred to like that, I feel like that would be one of the most degrading things in your career.
Having covered the court since 2017, I have not really seen them go back and forth in opinion like this. They do like to respond to one another, but this came across as a cat fight in legal documents. It was very heated. I think it gets, if people have the time, they should look at the opinion. I think it's around footnote 8 that gets a little spicy. And Justice Barrett actually begins by acknowledging Justice Sotomayor, the senior justice's dissent, and basically says, references that it's a disagreement over the Judiciary Act and authority there. But then she goes on to say, and basically pointedly, that she doesn't make much sense of Justice Jackson's argument. And that one, I think the reason that there was such a response to it was because Justice Jackson was basically saying that what the majority has done is threatening the rule of law, and that the judges are the ones that should be the check on a potential executive that was to run amok. And that's just not how the majority sees it. They see that they are servants of the law.
Yeah. All right, Ben, you and I were talking about this earlier, the birthright citizenship aspect of this, because as this case's inception involved that, but the decision didn't directly address that. But I guess we're looking towards fall for something more specific on that.
Yeah, so ruling on the merits of whether Trump's executive order can direct executive agencies to interpret the 14th Amendment as not granting citizenship to anchor babies or, the children of foreigners, tourists, and of various other groups, that's going to be decided in the fall. All this has done is address the lower court injunctions right now, because this was a response to the emergency appeals from the Trump administration to lift the injunctive relief that these lower court judges gave to plaintiffs in those cases. Will they come back potentially in a class action and get a larger injunction? That's certainly possible. The scope of this ruling and its longstanding implications for injunctions are going to have to play out in court as the administration uses this argument to try and advance some other policies, like using the Alien Enemies Act. They've already mentioned they plan to appeal that and try to get further along with the deportations now that they have some sort of ammunition in the boring legalese.
Yeah. All right, Alex, I want to move on to this other case, Mahmoud v. Taylor, the religious opt-out case for LGBTQ plus material. How grotesque are we talking about when we're looking at these materials that were involved in this case? And tell us about the case.
Yeah, so real quick, just to close that out, there already has been a class action filed right away after the Supreme Court ruling over the birthright citizenship case. I think it's in the District of New Hampshire. So just on that same point, it looks like they're already going that route. So we'll see what happens. Now, this LGBTQ story time was maybe my favorite case of the term. I found it very interesting. And I was surprised it was 6-3, because during oral arguments, it seemed like even Justice Kagan at times was like, I can see how some even non-religious parents would have issues with these stories. In the opinion by Justice Alito, he actually went to length to detail some of these books. There's even some of them in color, which you don't always see in a Supreme Court opinion. One book as part of the curriculum was Pride Puppy, and it was taught to pre-K age 3-4-year-olds, where they had to look at vocabulary terms like drag queen, underwear, leather. There was one about a girl named Penelope, and she goes to her mom and says she feels like a boy. She doesn't feel like a girl. There's one about a young girl who has an uncle who got married to a man. There's another one about a prince whose parents keep wanting him to find a bride, but he ends up falling for a knight, and they get married on their wedding day. The curriculum also instructed teachers to let students know that doctors guess at birth, that it's just a guess. And so you can see why parents of different faiths had a problem with this. They challenged us on First Amendment grounds and said we should be able to opt our children out of this education if we disagree with it based on our religion. And at first, the school was allowing opt-outs, and then they followed up and stopped the opt-out option. The Supreme Court said that's not allowed, that the public schools are supposed to be available to everyone and not run afoul of the First Amendment infringe on religious teaching at home. So they sided with the parents, and basically the school will have to now allow an opt-out option.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh during your answer, but it is so ludicrous to suggest that doctors are just guessing gender. I suggest they go back to medical school if they can't figure it out, because I'm pretty sure there's one little region, you just do one check and it'll tell you really, really quickly. Alex and Ben, thank you so much. Y'all are going to stick around through the break, and we'll be back with more coverage of the Supreme Court decisions today after the break.
Hey, folks, if you've been following the facts, not the spin, you know we're living through a pivotal moment in American history. In just the first 5 months of President Trump's return, we've seen measurable progress. Border security is tightening, deportations are up, woke and DEI policies are being dismantled, and our military is being restored to strength as a fighting machine. These are real actions, not talking points, but here's what the facts can also tell us. One man can't fix everything. Congress needs to get in line with the American people, and that's where you come in. Join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, at amac.us/justnews for as little as $12 a year. You'll get their award-winning magazine, valuable discounts, and access to free resources. But more importantly, you'll be part of a movement committed to protecting the values that made this country great: faith, family, and of course, freedom. Don't just read the headlines, help shape them. Join me and become an AMAC member today by going to amac.us/justnews and stand with millions of informed Americans right now.
Welcome back, everybody. I am still joined by Chief Political Correspondent here at Just the News, Ben Whedon, as well as attorney and Washington Times legal affairs reporter and author of the new book, Lawless Lawfare, Alex Boyer. Thank you both for sticking with me. Ben, I'm going to go to you on this case out of South Carolina. It was Medina. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but you know because you wrote a story about it.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is the Supreme Court setting the way for states to remove Planned Parenthood clinics and similar abortion-related clinics from their state Medicaid programs. So the issue here is back in 2018, the South Carolina Attorney General looks at the 2 Planned Parenthood clinics in the state and says, you know what, state law is not actually going to let us issue Medicaid reimbursements to these clinics. They do abortions. And so obviously Planned Parenthood sues. They take a patient who would have gotten an abortion and used Medicaid at this one of these clinics as the primary plaintiff. And the issue at hand is whether or not the states can actually do this. And the Supreme Court somewhat punts on the issue, but this goes to the broader theme that we were talking about in the birthright citizenship case of them looking at where congressional authority and executive oversight overlap with the judiciary. So here what winds up happening is they say the Medicaid provision does not actually create a right of action for these clinics or for recipients. The normal remedy, if the federal government thinks that the state's action is going to be in violation of the terms of these federal grants that go to Medicare for these state programs, would be for the HHS secretary to make that determination and withhold the funds. Robert F. Kennedy has not done that, and theoretically, if a new administration comes in and wants to make that determination, then you'll have a fight on the merits. But what this has done now is effectively say that if states decide they want to disenroll Planned Parenthood clinics or abortion clinics from their state Medicaid programs, no patient who would otherwise use Medicaid as a reimbursement source for an abortion or who would have gone to these clinics, nor the clinics themselves can actually file a lawsuit. So at the very least, it's currently carte blanche for Republican-aligned states to disenroll these clinics from the Medicaid program. And that's particularly relevant for Planned Parenthood because such a large portion of their funding comes through Medicaid reimbursement. Now, this is not direct funding from the federal government for abortion. Planned Parenthood does do other things. And what you're seeing is they get a lot of their revenue from people coming for these programs, and then they use Medicaid to get a reimbursement and go to Planned Parenthood. So there's some indirect, there's some barrier in between the direct federal funding and what winds up in Planned Parenthood's coffers. But this is going to take out another one of those sources. And this is coming as the federal government, part of the big beautiful bill, is looking to just defund Planned Parenthood outright.
Yeah. Alex, does this seem like a pretty big nail in the coffin for Planned Parenthood in general?
It does. In the opinion, they basically recognize that Medicaid is a contract between the federal government and the states. And therefore, as was just stated, patients, or I guess Medicaid recipients, and the Planned Parenthoods themselves do not have a right to sue. So the question would be, well, who would sue? So right now, yes, it looks like a green light for states to go ahead and implement similar legislation that South Carolina has.
Okay, Ben, I want to go back to you because you have such a brilliant political mind when it comes to strategy and just all things politicking. Do you anticipate that Democrats are going to use the Planned Parenthood, the abortion issue again in midterm elections to try to drum up support and get people to show up?
Well, to be honest, they tried that in 2024, and we also saw that show up in the midterms in Virginia 2 years ago.
Right.
It hasn't really been able to move the needle. They certainly thought it was going to be a bigger deal, and in 2022, immediately after the Dobbs versus Jackson decision, they were able to kind of ride the wave of concern and uncertainty to score some very serious wins and stop several abortion laws from taking effect, even to get some of their own referendums in there. But we've seen the momentum kind of die out because for 50 years, we've been told, if a Roe v. Wade gets overturned, it's a return to the back alley abortions. That certainly hasn't really happened a whole lot, and people have had time to get used to the idea of states having restrictions on abortion to some degree. We've got almost half the states have at least a 12-week ban at this point. Many more are close to total bans, and it's really not that big of an imposition if, say, you live in North Carolina to take a drive upstate to Roanoke. It's just not been as much of an impact for people who would otherwise get an abortion. If they go further in trying to restrict it, then we might have more ammunition from the Democrats' side to actually mobilize people on this. But at the current status quo, the pro-life movement has kind of struggled to adapt to go from this national campaign to the state-by-state canvassing. And it's somewhat fallen out of the electoral cycles, especially at the national level, since it's not really an issue for Washington anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and you really only hear it bantered about as a political wedge issue in very, very deeply blue states. We've just got a few minutes left. So, Alex, I want to finish with a question about this Texas age verification law. What is this about?
So yeah, Texas had passed a law in 2023 requiring porn websites to have an age verification measure for adults to access porn websites. And the goal was to keep children away from viewing that material. A group of basically it's Free Speech Coalition, which is a trade group of the porn industry, challenged this under the First Amendment and said it was a violation of that. And the Supreme Court took it up, but decided essentially that the state has authority to govern what exactly it wants its children to see and protect the children. So they did not see a constitutional violation. And so they said they affirmed the lower court. What was really at issue was the challengers wanted heightened scrutiny to be taken a look at the lower court, which meant that the Texas would have to prove that this is the law it needs, that there's not a more restrictive means of reaching their goal. And that it usually comes into play if there's some sort of constitutional right at stake. And since the court said the First Amendment isn't an issue here, the majority said this, they affirmed the lower court and said they didn't need to look at it with a heightened standard. The dissent was authored by Justice Kagan. She disagreed. She said, while some speech is able to be viewed by adults, other speech is not able to be viewed by children, and therefore, the First Amendment rights of the adults should come into play, and that lower court should have taken another look at this case.
Interesting. All right, a lot of politics and a lot of dynamics at play. Ben Weeden and Alex Hoyer, thank you both so much for being here and breaking these down.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Next, I told you earlier in the show that John was out on assignment tonight, but he will be back with us for just a few minutes next with our weekly Just the News Health Update. Stay with us.
Hey, America, the dollar reset that currency experts have been warning about for years just shifted into high gear, and the evidence is unmistakable. Central banks are hoarding gold at the fastest pace since records began. This isn't typical market noise. Why? When nations reach unsustainable debt levels and face chronic trade deficits, major currency devaluations usually follow. Gold isn't becoming expensive, even though it's at all-time highs. Why? It's the dollar that's losing value at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, central banks have bought over 1,000 tons of gold annually for 3 straight years because they see what's coming. This goes beyond inflation. It could mark the early stages of a full-blown dollar collapse. And if that happens, Americans could divide into two groups, those who prepared and those who wish they had. That's why American Alternative Assets created a free dollar reset survival guide to show Americans like you how to protect your retirement savings from currency collapse. Inside, you'll discover proven wealth strategies and potentially receive up to $10,000 in free silver just to jumpstart your position. So do me a favor, call 855-GOLD-340 or visit johnlikesgold.com right now. That's 855-465-3340 or simply go to johnlikesgold.com. Position yourself with the smart money before the reset arrives. Welcome back, America. Man will be back in a second. Time for our weekly Just the News Health Update. One of my favorite conversations of the week is brought to us by my good friends at Native Path. Joining us now, the co-founder and chief culture officer at Native Path, Dr. Chad Walding. Doctor, good to have you on.
Hey, John. So good to be here. Thank you for having me back.
We love having you back. This week and this month have been really important. I really want to focus on processed food. Everybody's talking about it, which I think is the first victory in the MAHA movement. We're talking about something that we used to sweep under the rug. There is a term that's been thrown around a lot, Lacey, called supplementation. What is supplementation? Why does it play a role in where we are right now?
Well, Native Path, when we refer to supplements, what we're referring to are vitamins and minerals and nutrients that we can support a healthy lifestyle, right? We recognize that there are certain aspects of a healthy diet that are completely missing in our modern world because of the way we've been eating. We've been eating, lots of sugar, lots of artificial dyes and toxic seed oils, and it's been making us sick. Along with that, we're seeing a super big rise in chronic disease. So what we're doing in Native Path is really educating people to get back on the path, get off the path of processed and refined foods, get on the path of whole, real food, and along with that, good hydration, movement, sleeping, sunshine, things like that. But the role of supplements is to help fill in the gaps of what's missing in your nutrition, right? And even if you are eating a perfect whole food diet in the modern world, we have to recognize there are still things that are missing because the modern world itself has changed and the context of where we're coming from. Most of us have been eating processed and refined foods because that's what I was told to eat when I was growing up. That's what I was offered, right? But even if I was eating a perfect cucumber or eating a perfect apple, it's coming from soil that has now been depleted of its vitamins and nutrients, right? So we're not getting what we need to really express what's possible in our biology. So supplements are really there to fill in the gaps and support a healthy lifestyle. It's not something that you take and everything is good. It fixes all your issues. Even if you're taking medicine, the foundation of your health should still be a whole real food diet.
Yeah, so important. And so few of us actually are on that diet right now. It's really remarkable. You mentioned the soil, and one of the things that Robert F. Kennedy, the MAHA movement, has done is reminded us that among the different things that we're dealing with that maybe grandma and grandpa didn't deal with 40, 50 years, a lot more herbicides and chemicals that are in the soil. They get into the food chain. They have a deleterious effect on our health, and we might not even know it because we don't taste it and we don't see it, but they're in there. More awareness about them than we've had in a long time, I think.
Yeah, a lot of awareness. And, I've thought about this a lot. I always look back at the past 100 years and how did we get to the point of our current day agricultural practices, right? And a lot of it came from the Depression. We had this depression where a whole country, a whole world went hungry and got skinny. And then we came out of that with a big desire to create an abundance of food. And the food industry really stepped up and they created mono agriculture. And that's where we come in and instead of growing, this plant over here and this food over there and this over there, you take a plot of land and you grow one thing and you can grow as much of it as you can. And so you grow things like corn and soy and wheat, and you turn that into a whole industry of processed and refined foods. And of course, when we grow those foods, now to make it work in mono agriculture, you've got to use herbicides and pesticides because that kills off everything else so you can grow this one thing. But what that does is it changes the quality of the soil over time. Generation, decade after decade after decade, you're going to have, for instance, less magnesium in that soil. The apple today is not what the apple used to be. The cucumber today is not what the cucumber back then used to be, right? And it's because of the practices of mono agriculture. And if you really go down the rabbit hole of what happens with corn and soy and wheat, many of us are trapped in this world where that's all we're eating. We're literally just drinking and eating corn, soy, and wheat just packaged with different labels that is raising our blood sugar issues and inflaming our bodies and deteriorating our guts. So what we really want to do is move back to good farming practices, whole real food. You and I were talking before this segment, one of the best things people can do with what they put in their grocery store or their pantry is to go to a farmer's market, talk to a farmer who's still growing in traditional ways, get the most nutrient dense foods, who's really honoring what the soil wants. That's one of the best multivitamins you can take, right? And then when you have that as a foundation, and we want to do the best we can. We don't want to rule out people who can't get access to a farmer's market, but you want to do the best you can and move towards whole real food. Use supplements to fill in the gaps of what's missing, knowing that you're still going to be missing some things that are important to your biology.
One of the things, even when you're eating a really good fruit and vegetable and natural diet, is your body starts to wane in protein, and then that results in a lot of joint issues. At least with me, it has. Collagen is one of those really important supplements that can make a big difference as we get in our 50s and 60s, right?
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge it can be overwhelming with supplements. There's so many supplements on the market, and even at Native Path, we have over 40 products that we firmly believe in for different various issues. But I also believe in doing the least things that make the most difference and starting out right. And when we're talking about starting out right, I highly recommend collagen, right? It's one of the least things you can do that makes the most difference in your health. And the reason is because collagen, it's the most abundant protein in your body. Of the three macronutrients, carbs, protein, and fat, protein is the essential macronutrient. You can live without carbs. You can go a long time without fat even, but you can't do very long without quality protein. So collagen is the most abundant protein. It's something our ancestors got plenty of in their natural diet because they would eat nose to tail. But in our modern diets, we almost get no collagen because of the way we've been eating. And our body produces collagen on its own, but we produce less and less as we age. So the older we get, I feel the more important it is to consume collagen on a regular basis to really help fill in the gaps of what's missing. And it's going to support things like your skin, your hair, your nails, how you appear, but it's also going to support things on the inside, like your bones, your gut linings, your tendons, your ligaments. So a lot of people report similar results of what you've told me. Your knees feel better, your elbow feels better, your back pain, hip, and all those things feel better. So it's a huge plus to the structure of your body, which helps you do more things that you want to do in life.
Yeah, and I never would have associated collagen with the gut before I got to meet you and learned all this, but that absorption process that often hurts our body from not getting the best nutrients out, it improves when collagen can get into that lining, and all of a sudden you're just retaining more of the right nutrients even when you eat right. Something I didn't understand in the equation until we got to know each other, which I'm really grateful for. Dr. Chad, you always make us feel better, and you're making us better with all the great work you're doing at Native Path. And folks, I want to offer you a special opportunity to join me on what I do at Native Path every week, and that is to take collagen. All right, now there's a special bundle deal at a fraction of the retail price plus free shipping. All you got to do is go to getnativepath.com/justnews, getnativepath.com/justnews. With over 4 million jars sold, thousands of 5-star reviews, and a 365-day money-back guarantee. This is your moment. Take control of your aging before it takes control of you. Go to getnativepath.com/justnews. All right, we'll be right back in just a few minutes right after these messages.
We lose the heat in the hero. Give me a cowboy, God and country strong. Give me a cowboy who knows left from right, from wrong. I'll be the one, you'll be the man, just like the good Lord planned. Give me a cowboy.
I love it. That song you just heard is Give Me a Cowboy by Natasha Owens, and she is targeting the war on real men going on in the country today. And Natasha is here with me to break it all down. Natasha Owens, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me.
All right, so this war on men has been going on for a while. What was the final push that you were like, I got to write a song about this?
The Olympics. So last summer, we saw on a world stage a woman who had trained her entire life to be there in that moment. And within 30 seconds, she gets beaten to a pulp by a biological man that was allowed in the ring as a woman. And I don't know where the feminists are. Where are the people for women's rights? We are losing our women's rights left and right. And the world was cheering this man on. And I said, okay, the church is not saying anything. Everyone's too scared to talk about this topic. I have 2 boys here in Texas, and I tell them every day, do not apologize for being a man. Women and men have their differences, their weaknesses. There's no way I can compete muscular in a sport with a typical man, and we should embrace those. God made us different for a reason, and we've moved away as a society from the nuclear family. That men should apologize for being masculine, and even peddling the lies that men can have babies. And I just thought enough's enough, and we're going to do it in a very clever way. And really talking about the cowboy creed here in Texas, our men live by that. Our ranchers live by that. They love God. They love this country. They love their family, and they just have conservative values, and they don't apologize for it. They're just good men. And we need more of that in today's society.
Absolutely. I always say, and it sounds incendiary and scandalous, but men and women are not equal. They are equivalent. Men and women have different skills that right. They level up. It's fantastic that God made us that way. Speaking of God and country, you kind of started this current trend of patriotic anthems. We're seeing it top the charts. We are seeing it in the country music world especially, but your smash hit single, Trump Won, that became a viral hit back in 2023, immediately debuting at #1 on iTunes before debuting at #5 on the Billboard digital sales chart. So when you started this path, were you thinking to yourself, I might get some pushback for it?
I knew I would. I was in the contemporary Christian world. I did a patriotic album in 2020 and did a pro-life song. I became too pro-life for the industry, and I was getting canceled. And so my husband had said for 2 years, you need to do a Trump One song and illuminate just a light on truth. And I said, I will not have a career if I do that in Nashville. They will never embrace me again. Well, when they did that to me, I thought, I'm not going to be a part of a genre of music that doesn't really stand up for life. So I turned and said, now is the time to do it. And, I don't regret it one bit. It got me to a different stage. And of course, I still get death threats. The other side is crazy, absolutely crazy. But I feel I have a responsibility to shine a light on the things the church is not talking about, and the thing that is too controversial for us to say in society. Let me give a song so that you can sing it, because a song is covered under a different level of protections. So we've had a blast just hitting all of these hot topics that radio stations will never take. They won't take Give Me a Cowboy in the country market. They said the nuclear family was too controversial. So I said, you know what, we'll just do press releases and get my music out that way. And the people have responded very well to it.
I love that. And when it comes to, studio musicians and producers and co-writers and things like that, has it been hard to find people to collaborate with?
When we decided to do Trump One, I knew what would happen. And me and my husband co-write on these songs, and our producer in Nashville. And he has a complete career in Nashville. And I knew that it would completely ruin it. And I said, it has to be your decision. And he jumped in with both feet. And we have not looked back. I have lost musicians. I have lost band members, studio musicians. It's just been, just name it. People have called and said, you'll never go out on the road with me again. Or they'll call and say, you're too controversial. I love what you're doing, but I could never voice that publicly, but keep doing it. So, I've kind of been out on an island at some point a little bit by myself, but I have stood tall and thought, if I can give someone the courage to stand up against the lunacy of the left and what they're trying to peddle, it just takes one, right, to change the world. And so hopefully I've given someone enough courage to do that.
All right. Pop quiz. What are your favorite few lines from the song that you just wrote, or from the song that we just played?
I love the, cooking in the kitchen, cool with taking your name. I'm okay with giving birth because you can't do the same. I love you don't have to be in boots as long as I'm the one in the dress. And then I love the bridge where it says, being a male is a matter of birth. Being a man is a matter of choice. Mamas, please let your babies grow up to be cowboys. That's my favorite part.
I love that. I love that so much. Natasha, let our audience know, are you going to be touring soon? More music coming out? Tell them how they can find you and support you.
NatashaOwensMusic.com. NatashaOwensMusic.com is a landing place. You can find my music. You can Google and find it anywhere, but my website gives you everything you need to know. I've got different, I don't have necessarily a tour these days because promoters will not book me, right?
Yeah.
But I've got these, I've been doing a lot of military stuff. I just got back
great.
today from singing for the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. I'm going to be going back there to do several things for them in the Marines.
Wonderful.
So stay tuned. Go to my
All
website
right.
and come and see me.
I love it. Natasha Owens, always a joy having you here with us, especially as we have 4th of July next week, a very patriotic holiday with your patriotic